This is Creativity Drill with Dr. Don and Jonathan Rundman.
Happy summertime, everybody. This is your co-host, Jonathan Rundman, right here. And this episode is a very historic event because it's the first time we ever recorded a live episode of Creativity Drill featuring a panel discussion. Dawn and I just returned from a week in the Northwoods of Wisconsin where we were at a creativity retreat along with a lot of other really amazing artists. And so we got them on the panel and we interviewed them all for this particular episode. And we think you will really enjoy it. So check that out. Also, a lot of these artists you can follow online and invite them to your town. Here we go. Let's get cooking with the very first live episode of Creativity Drill. All right. Hey, everybody. This is exciting. It's the very first live Creativity Drill podcast recording session ever. How about that? It's so cool. Usually Dawn and I do this show quietly at our kitchen table at 9 o'clock at night. It's, nice and intimate and cozy. But we were excited when we got invited to be part of this event because that meant we would have lots of creative people on hand and we could actually do a panel discussion like real big podcasts do. And so that is what we're going to try, the very first live episode. So we're glad that audience people, you are here. And we invite you to, write down some questions as we go. We have some super cool panelists for you as our process goes along. And Dawn, do you have any opening thoughts before we hear our theme song?
We're just glad to be here at the Heartwood Conference Center and Retreat. Can I say that?
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to say.
All right. And we've been spending the last several days with about 65 people talking about creativity and faith and hearing and seeing and smelling and tasting and experiencing all kinds of creativity from all kinds of people.
And we've been making art and hearing songs and singing songs and eating and swimming. It's just been awesome. So thanks for being here. We're going to introduce our panel here coming up, but we got to hear the theme song because it'll sound like a real live episode if we do. So let's hear the theme song for the show. Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Well, hey, our first panelist is our friend Keith J. Williams. And he is a musician and a potter and a professor. So let's say hi to Keith. Hey, Keith.
Hey, how's it going?
And why don't you, talk on your mic a little bit. Give us a little level.
I thought I'd do that.
Perfect. And, well, how's it going, Keith?
This has been a gas. I have really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's been a really fun time. And we're going to talk to each panelist just for a few minutes to get our listening audience in the loop, even though those of us here in person have been hanging out for a few days already. One of the things that's been interesting about having you here is you're practicing a craft that is truly ancient, and it's kind of you're really doing it the same way people have done it forever.
Absolutely. This, people have been making pots on the potter's wheel for about 5,000 years at least. Last I checked, the wheel still goes around in a circle and pots still come out mostly round.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what's your plans for the future? Do you have any, are you inspired to try something new or to go any new directions?
Yeah, the directions, of artwork going forward are not so much, boy, here's a new branch that just shoots at an angle completely to the side, but my creativity at this point as a mid to late career artist bubbles in directions and sort of blossoms in a like a cauliflower broccoli kind of way, that there's a lot of investigation of the subtleties of an area. So currently I've just added wood firing to the firings that I've been doing, and so the surfaces that I'm getting there are a new addition to what I've been doing, but still in that same theme of having the flame paint the clay as I'm trying to create interesting surfaces going forward.
If you are a creative person who uses words, like if you're writing songs or writing stories, which is my normal way of operating, you can get writer's block and sometimes have months or years where you can't get any new content. Can you get potter's block?
Yeah, you can. And my response to that is to simply make. You can always go back to old material and just say, well, I'm stuck in terms of which direction I'm going to go, but I'm not going to give myself the excuse of not working.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to reinvestigate an old direction and see if there's something new that will just raise its head. I don't have a plan. I'm not going to impose my will on the clay, but I want the clay to help me sort of see something new and see that thing that is going to become fresh. And in trusting that process, invariably, the creativity happens and the new directions show up.
I wonder if other creative media can learn from the potter, because it makes sense to me that, of course, if you have potter's block and you can't think of new shapes or new designs, you can always make something you've made before, and that's totally legit for a potter to make replicants of their earlier work, because lots of people have sets of dishes and sets of pots that are the same shape and the same color. And I wonder if we could give ourselves permission as songwriters or poets or story writers to rewrite our old material if we're stuck. What would happen if I thought, well, I don't have any new songs to write, but boy, I could re-record an older song, or I could rearrange an older song, or I could sing an older song in a different key playing a different instrument. And man, I've never ever thought about this before, but as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I bet that would be a very fruitful exercise.
I'm also a drawer, and I literally do that. I will go to old drawings and either draw on top of a drawing or simply redraw the drawing that I had done before, but using slightly different materials, or a slightly larger page or whatever. And just by remarking those original marks, something new and fresh always comes up. And so it's the work, it's that discipline of creating that leads to the new directions and keeps the work fresh. Yeah.
Wow. Very good. Do you have any thoughts about being a saxophone player and being a potter?
Well, sure. My pots are never perfectly pre-planned. You know, if I'm going to make a picture, I have a general idea in my head of what I want the picture to look like. It's going to be generally this size. It's going to have, maybe kind of a fat belly and a narrow neck and a big wide throat. But I don't have the piece in my head. I'm going to trust that when I put that ball of clay down, that my skill is going to allow me to have a healthy dialogue with the clay and create a pot that's probably slightly better than the idea that's in my head. So the bottom line is that picture is like the head of a jazz piece. I know where I'm going with it. I know what the chord changes are, but in the making of it, the individual variations are going to go, and the process is flexible and improvisational. The show that I've got coming up has actually got the word improvisation embedded deeply into it, because I don't make things off of a blueprint. I don't know exactly what it's going to be when I start. I just know the general direction I want to go, and then I let that creative improvisation happen.
I think it's cool how our different genre families inform the other ones. So if you're a potter, you can be influenced by jazz music. Or if you're a songwriter, you can be influenced by watching him spin that wheel. Or if and I'm sure those of you creative people in the audience and those of you listening have had that experience as well. That's Keith. Let's say thanks to Keith.
Thank you.
And Keith, would you bring up our next panelist?
I would love to. We've got Dr. Audrey West here, who is a New Testament scholar and a generally good person. I've really enjoyed getting to know her.
Audrey, let's have a hand for Audrey.
Well, thank you.
All right, welcome.
Well, thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Well, how are you feeling about this?
About this
event?
Oh, this event is fabulous. It's just fabulous.
I've enjoyed hearing you every morning. That's for those of you listening. Audrey gets to start our days here at this retreat with a couple hours of teaching and drawing and thinking and conversing, and it's been very interesting and inspiring. And there's been some themes I've heard you talk about in recent days that I wanted to ask you about that have really been inspiring or, I don't know, provocative for me. And one is this word hiddenness. And man, I love that word. And I feel like it's a really great word for artists and creative people, because I feel like we are in the hiddenness business in some ways, either trying to explore the hidden things of the world and then maybe even hide things ourselves in our work for our listeners and for our audience to discover or to ponder. Do you have any ideas about that?
Well, I also really love this concept of hiddenness, partly because in a way, it's like, it's like Aimée has talked about in this event, do your own adventure kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a way that when something is hidden from us, it means that we get to have the wonder and the adventure of discovery and uncovering something, and the element of surprise, because we don't really know what it is that we're going to find as we're working through that process. Sometimes the things we find are really fabulous, and they leave us feeling just inspired and energized and excited. Sometimes they hit us in the gut and cause us to have to go back and reflect some more and just live into that kind of oomph thing.
Yeah, or they leave us feeling more confused than we were initially.
Yeah, they lift up more questions.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm a really big fan of questions. I kind of wish that education was more about helping people learn how to ask good questions, rather than just knowing what the right answers are. And so the fact that things are hidden to us, I think, invites our questions. And from where I sit, I just think all kinds of things are enhanced by our questions.
I wanted to ask you if you teach children at all, or if you've had moments where trying to explore a concept or an idea with a child or a teenager has maybe given you some new views or lenses on something that you're typically talking about with adults.
Yes and no. So in my previous life, I used to be a swimming coach, and the age of children that I used to coach was most of them were under the age of 8. And so I had to teach children under the age of 8 how to, say, swim the freestyle stroke. And they couldn't, you can't just say, move your arms this way and turn your head that way. We had to think of really creative ways to think about that. So you want kids to get their elbows up high when they're swimming, and you say, so swim like a chicken. And they have their elbows sticking up while they're swimming down the pool. Or they're floating on their back, and you say, so imagine there's a balloon tied to your belly button, and it's making you float in the water. So those kinds of images, I learned how to teach with images and story, and trying to get people to be in a place where they can imagine in their own lives how something might be working. So those kinds of experiences as a coach have certainly shaped how I understand my role as a teacher.
When would you use the methods that you've been using, where we're reading a text, you've got the whiteboard, we're writing down phrases? Have you done that, or would you do that with teenagers? Are we not ready for that as human beings until we're in college? Until we're fit? If you were going to sort of map out a time to start that type of inquiry and exploration and finding those surprises, when would that happen in the human lifespan?
Well, I'm not a human development person, but if I were doing it, I'd probably do it with kids. I mean, I would start as early as anybody can hold a crayon or something, because I think that even children can draw and make shapes and get a hold of things. And the advantage for me, at least, in using a whiteboard is it makes it possible to have an image or words or a design or something that all of us can see together and we can share in it together. So I've done some teaching with junior high and high school, and I do the same thing. I did this as a youth director with whiteboard. In fact, I taught in the seminary with a whiteboard because I used to be a youth director. And I found that technique to be pretty helpful. So I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, no, that's good in talking about when you'd start using that collective imagination to sort of crack open a text, crack open a story.
I think the thing I love about starting early with younger people to do that kind of activity is that often as we get older, we're afraid that we might come up with the wrong answer, or that we'll say it in a way that somebody else doesn't approve, or maybe we have an insight that we're not really sure if it's okay. And if we do it collectively and we put stuff up on a board, it makes it possible for it to be a shared answer, and it feels safer to me somehow. And I think that works really well with younger people as well.
Well, it struck me that we were doing some crowdsourcing of theology together. And I love that word. I love all the different applications of it. And it really struck me as we've gone through those times where with your leadership that we were sort of crowdsourcing these ideas together, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, indeed, that's my favorite thing about teaching, is getting to hear what folks have to say.
You've been leading us through lots of stuff that to me feels very academic. You know, we're talking about texts that are 2,000 years old, that are in a different language, that we have to translate, and that we have to investigate the underlying original meaning of the original language and all that stuff. And so, but underneath all this, all the demands of history and language and all that stuff, you keep using words like imagination and like Dawn mentioned, crowdsourcing. And so your approach has been very, very flexible with something that to a layperson might seem a little bit intimidating. And you have it seems like an artistic approach to what you're doing. Is that how you think of it?
Well, thanks for, I'm glad it came across that way, because I sure like to try, I try for that in my teaching. Actually, I don't know that I've ever thought about it as an artistic practice until I was preparing for this event. And the fact that this event was explicitly named as a time for us to engage creativity and imagination. And certainly I understand that those are aspects of my own work, but I don't think I don't think if anyone asked me, so when you teach the Bible, are you all about teaching creativity and imagination? I think I might have said, I'm about teaching asking good questions and uncovering what we can uncover so that we can hear how these stories that are shared with us from our ancestors in the faith, we can hear them and feel them and experience them in our lives today.
Do you think of the source documents themselves as artistic works, or are they more like historical documents or personal letters between people and communities?
Yes, all of those
things.
Above. Yeah, all of those things. I actually I have a good time trying to imagine what it might be like for who the folks were who were composing these documents, what their communities were like, what they were worried about, what they thought about when they went home at night, and they're trying to figure out how they want to, share the story of Jesus and who he was and why he was important.
Or I wonder if they're writing the original document and then they say, "Oh, that was a really good paragraph." Yeah. I really slam dunked that one. Actually, or they try to sneak in a little joke or a turn of phrase, like any of us who are writing.
Yeah, in fact, the more I
study
the New Testament, both the letters and the Gospels, the more places I discover where I'm convinced that the writers whose work we have collected, they cared so passionately about how to share their experience of God and the truth of Jesus Christ that they did it in a real deliberate way. And you can see patterns in the way that they wrote, and you can see repetitions in their words. You can see places where their daily life is influencing how they're sharing certain stories and stuff. So the more I study, the more I encounter those kinds of things.
Yeah. Hey, that's Audrey West. Audrey, could you welcome up one of the Tangled Blue people, whichever person you feel like you want to sit next to?
I would be delighted to invite Aimée to come up and share with us from Tangled Blue.
Aimée Pakan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Aimée.
Hi, Jonathan and
Welcome.
Dawn and Keith and Audrey. Thank you.
Well, this is your baby.
Well, it was, Yes, and it was also a combination of traveling and hearing stories from people and the desires of people's hearts for something like this. So I can't take full credit. It was definitely a team effort.
A collaboration.
A collaboration, exactly.
But it's got to start someplace.
Yeah.
And well, really, you and Joel are the curators. I'm into this word curation, and you're the curators of this event.
We are, yes.
So you had the fun of deciding where it was going to be, who the contributors were going to be, what the schedule was going to be. Have you ever curated it's almost like a 5-day piece of performance art?
We haven't ever done anything like this before, but as we were dreaming and scheming, we decided to stack the deck with some really, really great artists and musicians and writers that we admire ourselves, and so that's how we kind of envisioned this. We really wanted it to be excellent.
Did it have any of the same sense of satisfaction as writing a good song? To conceive of an interesting gathering and make it happen?
Absolutely.
Is there some commonalities there?
I think, well, in a lot of ways, it's a beautiful thing because we get to see it entering into people's lives. And sometimes when you write a really good song, people will tell you like 5 months later, oh, that song really moved me, or I love that story. But in an event like this, you actually get to see art and faith working in people's lives immediately. And I think that's a real gift. Yeah.
What are you going to take away from this as the curator and as a participant and as a musician?
That's a big question. I think, first of all, I'm going to take away that this is a good conversation. We need to continue this conversation, that it shouldn't stop here.
Well, it's kind of it's an underrated or maybe an under-conversed conversation. Like, I think there's not enough opportunity to talk about this stuff.
I think you're right, and especially, being in a church circle myself, I think we need to allow people with vision, people who are creative, people who are artistic, not beyond music, but also including music, to be able to express that in a faithful way. And this conversation for me is hopefully a Kickstarter for a lot of people to dream about how they can use their creativity in their art, whether it's in their daily lives with conversation, or if it's living that out in their faith community. So I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out.
Now, you and your bandmate spent many, many years just driving around North America.
True.
And then now I don't know all the details, but it seemed like there was a period of time where you were kind of home for a while, you were home more than usual. And
True.
Now all of a sudden you're out there like crazy again on the road. What's it like to be back on the road?
Beautiful. I love being on the road. So yeah.
What was it like to take a break and then come back? Did you get a new appreciation for it, or what was that like?
I think for me, it kind of gave a new vision and a new passion. We were at a place where we were starting to kind of revision how we approached being on the road, and we had some opportunity to live into calling in different ways. And
how long was your little rest time?
About 2 years.
Yeah.
About 2 years. And at the end of that, Joel and I started dreaming again about how to live into this calling as Tangled Blue. And I think it re-energized both of us, gave us both a new vision and some energy to go back out on the road. And, at this point in time, we've been at this 14 years and have traveled about 650,000 miles. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Think of all the musicians who are totally legit, like great musicians, great songwriters, making records and playing shows, who would love to be full-time touring musicians, who would love to quit their day job and buy the van and hit the road and just play. You've really done that.
Yeah, yeah.
So what, do you have any words of wisdom for someone who is maybe at a point in their life where they could make some deliberate choices in order to set themselves up for that kind of thing?
I think when I look at my musicianship, I think there's always room for growth. And I'm not done growing as a drummer or a vocalist or a songwriter. I think people give up too soon. Like, they have this dream that they want to pursue a form of art, and the voices around them, be that, you know, family members, or maybe just life gets in the way, they are having a hard time paying bills or whatever, they give up too soon. I fully recognize that there are plenty of musicians who are not doing this for a living, who are far better musicians than I am. But I think Joel and I have been consistent and persistent.
Yeah.
We haven't given up. We've
Yeah.
had that calling, and we've kept following it.
Yeah.
And that's what I give credit to, you know, that...
Well, and I think, too, like, for example, at this event, your parents are here. Both sets of your parents are here. That's evidence of the support that you have from
Absolutely.
the people that are most important
from the very start
in your life. And,
Joel,
man, I agree with you that it's been my experience that people who are artists get a lot of crap from their family members and spouses and partners, and just like, when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to grow up and do something normal?
Are you still doing your music thing?
Yeah. Are you still doing your little music thing?
Are you still making your pots?
And it's like, it's kind of a drag.
It can be. It can be.
I would think if you've got a life surrounded by people who kind of are dissing you all the time, it would be really hard to take those risks to get the ball rolling.
I think so too. It's been a gift to have supportive parents. It's not unusual to get the question, where are you now? But it's never, you two should quit and get real jobs,
Right.
whatever a real job is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a real job.
Exactly. Yes.
Rocking.
Well, full.
Are you still
rock.
doing that little law practice?
Yeah, does any lawyer get that? When are you gonna
With those cases and
Yeah.
briefs. I wanted to ask Aimée about creativity and marriage. I'm already thinking, if there were going to be sort of offshoots of the creativity and faith, you could have like one that was a marriage retreat, or not really, but
Creative marriage.
Creative marriage. But both of you being creatives, obviously you're in your business together. There's lots of couples that are in a business together, but you're in a creative business together. You're traveling all the time, and you're needing to make art as part of what you do, so you have fresh repertoire. How do you see your marriage as having some really different parts or deeper parts compared to just other marriages, whether it's people your age or people that you see? Like, what's sort of a unique part of being a creative duo?
I think getting to make art together is a real gift. I think in a lot of ways we complement each other. Sometimes we help redirect each other. It's not unusual. Joel writes a lot more than I do. And there are mornings where he'll come to me and be like, I'm just not quite sure about this word combination. What do you think? And then we'll brainstorm together. And a lot of times, he'll either take a suggestion that I've given, or he'll like chew on it a little more, and something creative comes out of that conversation. A lot of times, if one of us has written a song, the other will bring a new angle or a new part that maybe I hadn't thought of or Joel hadn't thought of to enhance whatever the other person has written. And that's a real gift too, because you get to kind of grow in that together. It's not unusual for us to get the question, as we're traveling on the road, how do you two spend so much time together? Because a lot of couples don't live this way. They each have their separate jobs, and at the end of the day, they come together and they have to catch each other up on each other's lives. And Joel and I have a lifetime of shared experiences. And at the end of the day, it's more about, well, that was a good day. Yeah, that was a good day. This thing was really cool. Yeah, it was. All right. So our lives are different in that way. We don't have to catch each other up on each other's days.
Would you bring up your husband to the panel?
I'd like to introduce my lovely husband, Joel Pakan.
Oh, yeah. Let's have a hand for Joel. Hi, Joel.
Hi.
Joel, I would ask you to address the same question that Aimée was just talking about, and how you see your marriage as a creative one.
Yeah. Okay. It's always been this way. So ignorance is bliss, I guess. We've just always lived this way. So it's always been this kind of a partnership. And when we started off, we met because of music. because I walked into a class in college and brought my guitar in because I didn't want it sitting in my cold car in Minnesota in February. And had I not brought the guitar in, I don't think Aimée would have come up and asked, like, hey, what kind of guitar do you have? And then, after years of kind of traveling around the country in different bands, we started playing together, and then we started playing together as Tangled Blue shortly after we got married, and so it's just been great. I wouldn't want it any other way. So, and maybe that's just my limited imagination, but it's just so great. I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah. And you've been called Tangled Blue for 14 years.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Look, bands don't last very long.
Yeah.
And so to have a band that can go over 10 years with, a repertoire of songs and a selection of recordings and, the band members, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, the band is much less important than the marriage.
Yeah.
So,
do you actually intellectually consider the band its own thing apart from the two of you as a family unit?
I think, for a level of health, because like the band can have bad days, and the marriage can have bad days too, but I try not to let the band having a bad day make the marriage have a bad day.
Yeah. I remember when I was in my, early 20s, and I started meeting people who had real bands that were successful for the first time, and I would be hanging out and talking with them, and I would hear them, let's say it was the band members together at a restaurant or something, and they would start talking about the band and using the band's name as if it was a separate entity. And I, as an outsider, I was listening to them talk, and I was like, you guys are this band. You're talking about yourselves. Yeah. But they were like, referring to the band almost like it was, like Microsoft.
Or like not in the room.
Like it's not in the room, but it's like, but you guys, maybe you're actually who you're talking about.
Right.
But they had this idea of the band as a separate entity, and I thought that was just so cool. Like the band was its own creature.
Well, because we're greater than the sum of our parts, and certainly we try to play that way. Like when Aimée and I play, we try and sound like a full 3 or 4 piece group.
Right.
So the band is something different when we come together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen you guys perform a lot, probably almost since you started. Maybe not at the very beginning, but at least maybe 10 years ago or whatever. So. And it's always seemed to me like a key defining quality about your band is technology and instruments. And that's what makes you different than a lot of other folk duos or any just bands, is that you have a lot of equipment, you have a lot of technology that you're good at using. And it's obvious, I think, to the audience that you like lots of drums and lots of technology. And you set it up and you use it all, and it's all part of what makes Tangled Blue different than any other band you would go to see. And I think that's an interesting thing for you guys to talk to us about, because any of us in the arts, we all use tools. It might be your laptop, it might be a pen and paper, it might be different kinds of paint, it might be different kinds of clay, but you guys are employing lots of different tools, more than the average person. And I would venture to guess that the work that you make is shaped by the tools that you have. And that's kind of something you kind of get a charge out of. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's very much the case. I like toys. And I was joking last night, that I had a pretty full-on addiction to eBay, especially when we were first together, first married, and we were living in this farmhouse on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, and I, so like I would find these little tools and like the vocoder, the $25 vocoder on eBay, and
that's a perfect example.
Yeah, ended up writing this whole song around it, just because it was interesting, and probably the worst tool I ever purchased, I still haven't found a way to use it, is this thing called a kazooka. It was an amplified kazoo, and it just
Amy is shaking her head.
Yeah, it sounds awful. It just sounds awful. I was like, oh, I could run wah-wah pedal through it. It'll be so great. It's just awful. I mean, it is the worst sound ever.
You know, someday though, it's going to be the perfect thing.
Oh, I know, right? And I got it.
You just have to wait long enough for it to be the perfect
Jonathan,
thing.
you and I are so.
Well, you know, I was watching you guys play last night, and I was thinking about the Beatles, because they're the perfect example of tools bringing forth new ideas. For example, so what happened to the Beatles? Like, George Harrison gets into Indian mysticism or whatever. Yeah. So he buys a sitar, and then sure enough, the next Beatles album has sitar on it.
Yeah.
And then there's advances in the studio, and they go from 2-track to 4 or whatever. And then the minute they have more tracks to work with, then you get Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
And by the end of their career, what is it, Abbey Road or whatever, they're playing the synthesizer. The synthesizers were brand new. And so whatever tools were falling into their laps, they were incorporating it. It was changing their songs drastically, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just one band. And so in rock music, it happens all the time. And you could, or if you ever see that Beach Boys movie that just came out, what's it called? Love and Mercy, you know, and it's Brian Wilson discovering new technology and new studio trickery and whatever, and then man, their sound is radically changed by the tools that they have.
Well, and I didn't, you know, I wasn't aware of the melodica as an instrument until I came and saw your album release show at the Bryant Lake Bowl.
Oh yeah,
where you did you do "Come Sail Away" with a melodica intro?
Oh yeah, I probably played the Styx song. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah, and
I love that. I love that instrument.
Yeah, and like I heard that, I was like, that's I have to have one.
That's awesome. So creative people, if you're wanting inspiration or to maybe take a new zigzag in your output, one thing you could do is get yourself some new tools. Maybe buy a new set of pens, or buy a different kind of book of paper, or buy a new computer, or buy a new guitar, or buy a vocoder. And I bet you're going to come up with something interesting. And Keith wanted to comment on tools. What were you going to say?
Well, the genius of the Beatles is that they always chose wisely. When they got that new sound, when they got that new technology, they always seemed to be able to create a song that was right for that. And I think that Tangled Blue does that really well. And in my field, I've got the choice of different kilns. I've got, you know, raku kilns and wood kilns and gas kilns and electric kilns. And then the dance of creativity involves making the right choices. Is this piece right for this firing? Just like, is this piece right for this instrument?
Yeah, yep. Joel, do you have any thoughts about curating this event?
It was a lot of work, and I didn't know if it was hard to visualize if it was going to work as well as it has. Like I had hoped, by putting the personalities that are here in this room, both people listening and those of us here who are on this panel talking, that it would be as successful as it was. But I didn't know that it would be until probably 10 minutes into the Sunday evening presentation with Keith starting to throw clay and people just crowding around, kids just like sitting on the very edges with getting, you know, clay splatters on their knee, you know, and then it was like, oh, okay, this is going to be great. But I didn't know it. I had doubts in my own spirit that I wasn't willing to voice.
It's always risky to do something big, especially when you're inviting other people to be in the audience or to participate.
Right.
And where there's money on the line, you know, people paid money to come to this.
Right. Yeah, and it could have really, really been bad. I mean, there were lots of opportunities. There were probably more opportunities for this to really be a bad experience than it being a great one, and it's been a great one.
Well, I think this is interesting, too, because some of us make art that's... There's low-stakes art, and then there's kind of high-stakes art, and both are equally legitimate, right? So no matter what you're doing, good for you, it's awesome. But low stakes art would be like you're writing your poetry or making your pottery or writing your song in your house. Maybe someday you might have a gallery show and put it for sale. Maybe someday it might appear on an album. But then again, if it never did, no big deal, right? So that's sort of low stakes. But then there's high stakes art. And the stakes might involve money. The stakes might involve the precious time of the people you're inviting to come and witness it. So those are like if you say to your friends, let's put on a show, and you write a script and you rehearse a play and you rent a theater and you put up posters around town and invite a bunch of people to come. I mean, now the stakes are really high, because if your play is boring or if you don't know what you're doing and you've paid money to rent the space and people come out, or if you publicize it in the media and, oh great, now we're in the newspaper or now we're on the radio. And now now the actual thing has to live up to its image or its hype or whatever. Then the stakes are higher. And this was a super high stakes.
Certainly in, the little kind of, the world that Aimée and I travel in as folk duo, it's stakes, but it's not, at the end of this event, writing, the checks to the lodging and the food and all those things that made this event happen. It's very high stakes.
But there's something too, though. If you take the risk to do high stakes art, then the payoff there's a real high to the
what
payoff.
A huge payoff this is.
Right.
This is it is the gold rush for me for creativity for this summer.
Yeah.
Having a super busy summer, and Aimée and I were home for one day last week, and we were home for 2.5 days the week before that, and and I feel like this is going to give me the energy to make it through the next month. That is going to be crazy busy, and we're only going to be home just kind of piecemeal here and there.
Yeah.
And so
maybe a takeaway could be that maybe a challenge for yourself in your own creative life is to maybe once in your life or once every 5 years, push yourself to a higher stakes situation.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a little stressful, right? But the potential for fun and the potential for community and joy and maybe even the potential for money and the potential for momentum in the future are way more.
Yep.
So that's it's interesting when when there's a gamble going on in any of the art that we make.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you welcome? Do you want to come up? Will you welcome our other panelists?
Everybody, welcome up here, Holly Hansen.
All right. Hey, Holly.
Hello.
We don't know you at all. It's great to see
great.
you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
This is Holly. She's going to play concert tonight.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Awesome. How's it going?
It's great. It's a pretty drive up here, so it's hard to be in a bad mood.
All right. Well, how are you doing? How do you feel about the creative process?
I feel constantly conflicted with the creative process. It's funny because I actually, as y'all were talking up here, I said something like real quickly to someone on Facebook, kind of as a joke, and then it like hit me like, oh my goodness, that's what it feels like. It was live for the challenge, die from the pressure. And so I'm actually at a place where I almost like when you were talking about giving up, I did that, and I'm trying to figure out how to push a little bit more towards, okay, I do want to be an artist and I do want to spend more time, and then just like you said, it's almost an inactive decision, because if you don't push, you just fall back into typical reality. Me and the creative process are trying to become friends again. I haven't put out a record since 2012. Just put out little songs here and there, but I used to be very, I just used to have a lot of momentum, I guess. Like you were talking about momentum, and boy, things can change as you get older. I don't even have kids. But you just start to realize maybe I should have money is often the issue. Like I feel like I should be getting somewhere. I feel like I shouldn't be driving such a crappy car. I feel like I should be showing something with and that's kind of what our society teaches is the right way to live. That by the time you're getting in your upper 20s, you should have like a platter with all of the things you've purchased and this castle you've built. And I'm just trying to like chip away at that out of my brain again to be like, no, actually, it's more about who you are, not what you have.
You used the word quit. Did you actually consciously say, I'm quitting now?
I did say I need to not play for a year.
Wow. When did that happen?
It was actually really hard because I kept saying yes, but so I think I said a year, and then it took like a year to actually stop playing. But that was probably like 2013.
Wow. So you are right now in a huge turning point.
Yep, definitely. Wow. Yes.
How cool that we get to talk to you right now.
I know, right?
How did it feel to take a year off? Was it kind of great?
It was in the sense like, I mean, I had a lot of personal things going on that were extremely stressful and a lot to just process. And it got to a point where when I used to have regular practices with my band, Zoo Animal, and it'd be like, so where's new material? So where's new material? And I'm like, I don't have any new material. Stop making me feel guilty about it. I don't know what to say. I don't have anything. I'm thinking about a lot of things. So sometimes for me, it's like I have to think for like a month maybe, and then I know what I'm trying to say. And that was like a process. I had never dealt with so much personal change in my life. So I think I just had to be like, I'm not playing anymore. So that no one would ask me if I had any new material. No one would ask me to play a show. It's like, I can't even figure out what I am right now. The last thing I want to do is get on a stage and make any sort of proclamation. So it felt, I mean, it was sort of a sad thing, but it actually just felt very necessary and like a big sigh.
Yeah. What were some of the positives about taking a break?
I became more healthy mentally because I definitely was a workaholic, both in music and just in all I'm always doing a million part-time things because I try to fit it into music. So I definitely overloaded myself, and I have much better boundaries now with, okay, maybe you can't just push because you will no longer exist, and then you won't have any creative voice. Yeah. Because you're just a zombie. Yeah,
and the history of the world is filled with artists who didn't rest. And they pushed, and they freaked out and burned out, or something horrible happened, or they just faded, or they just. Oh yeah. It was just bad.
And I felt like even at the time I kept reading, I like to just read how people's lives happen, the people I admire, and it just seemed like it was tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. Yeah. And like substance abuse and like mental exhaustion, and I was like, okay, maybe that's like something some people have this odd like obsession with, is this tormented artist who's never happy, but I'm just not willing to sacrifice myself for a creative pursuit. That's not worth it to me. And I think that was actually something that even just like reading Wikipedia articles about people that I really admired, and I was like, I just don't know if it's worth going down that path. So I guess that was partly why I think I decided to have my day job be my main thing, because I thought, well, maybe if I do it as a hobby, it won't feel so hard.
Yeah.
When you were on that break or hiatus, did you do other creative things? Did you paint? Did you draw? Did you write poetry? Were there other ways that your creative self was fulfilled, or did you just really need to not be activating those parts of you?
I think I really did nothing. I was in school a little bit because I'm actually also I really love numbers, and I was in school for some bookkeeping, so I kind of just went in the opposite direction and just worked very much with like concrete mathematical financial problems that were very easy to see on a spreadsheet. Yeah. So I think to me that is creative. I love spreadsheets. Like, I love them. I seriously have like a crazy obsession with taking information and making it simple and using formulas. But so I guess in a way that would have been the thing I was doing creatively. But even like I wasn't reading. I was not listening to any like interesting lectures. My brain was, I think I was already actually just, my brain was fried. And so I would find myself just sitting on my porch with like a book in my hand, and then I would just be staring. And I'd be like, oh my goodness, a half hour just went by.
So how did you come out of the hiatus and realize, hey, it's time to get back out there?
It was actually, I don't remember why this happened, but I remember the thought, and I said to, I think I maybe was at a show or I saw a show or something, and I went, that looks fun. And I was like, whoa, I haven't felt like that in like 4 years. Like, that looks fun. I want to go up there and do that again. And I feel like I have something to say, because that's the other thing I used to say when I was younger. I'd see these bands play, and I'm like, where are you up there? Like, it doesn't look like you're having fun. You're just, I think they live for the moment of walking off the stage. And then
when it's done.
And then putting their sunglasses back on and like walking outside and smoking a cigarette. That's like what they live for. They don't live for like the art. And so I was like, the second I don't have anything to say, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to keep going. And I think I felt like that. I felt like I don't know at least I don't know what I want to say.
Yeah.
So for my own integrity, I need to stop right now.
Yeah.
And then it was like, that looks fun. I feel like I have something to say. And then I booked a show. And
what did it feel like in your body when you found yourself thinking that looks fun?
It was like a little twinkle in my eye, I feel like. Like, I was like almost a secret. Like, I don't really want to tell anybody because I don't want that big wave of questions and pressure to come back.
Yeah.
So I just quietly booked the show before I even told my bandmates. And then I like made sure they were available, and I was like, okay, cool, because I already booked it. But yeah, I felt like I wanted to, it needed to be like, I think art is this way. It has to start, not has to start private, but there's things about it that should be very intimate, and then you kind of like let it go. And I felt like almost booking that show for me, I was like, I almost want this to be my little secret. And it was actually, I decided I wanted to play a show, and the next day I had it booked.
Yeah.
So it was like,
well, that was a good sign that people wanted you back.
Yeah, and
the universe was ready for you.
Totally. And the show we played was very encouraging.
Did you have to warm up again with the band, or was it like riding a bike?
It was like riding a bike.
Yeah, that's
definitely
good. Wow, oh, it's such a cool. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
That's
I'm glad
awesome.
To be here to celebrate. It's really been this month actually, or like July. It's really ramped up. So
awesome. Let's say thanks to Holly. Oh yeah. This is the time where we would like to all field some questions from you and from one another, and just as the panelists and the audience together. So if you've written down your questions, you can write them down, pass them up here. We'll take a look at them. And I actually thought of something when Holly was talking that I'd love all of us to comment on if we feel like it, and that is self-care of the artist, of you yourself as the artist. And have you all had times in your life where you had to slow down or change behavior or reconnect or something just to keep yourself balanced and healthy? And what was that like, and what have you found has been effective? And you can share the microphone.
So yeah, we were able to Aimée and I were able to carve out almost a month, because it was maybe closer to 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks of no shows, and in a cabin in the Black Hills in South Dakota. So it was no internet, you couldn't even get a radio signal into the canyon, and no TV, and that was just a really great recharge. And that was now 7 years ago, 10 years ago. It was 10 years ago. We totally need to do that again. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I'm craving that.
Yeah.
So that was like a one big thing.
Yep.
And it was super helpful to do it in a big way like that, and to just go off the road and be in this secluded kind of canyon in the Black Hills in South Dakota. But I feel like it's important to do that. It was important for us to do that, and I want to do it again. But there's got to be some other ways. And I can't think of any of the small ways right now.
I'd like to hear from Audrey to see, like, as someone who's been in academia and had to deal with students who are probably a little bit stressed, and you in your own career path. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
I'll answer for myself first and then probably say, and you should not try this at home. For myself, in recent years, self-care has meant saying no to some things that otherwise would have been really great prospects in terms of job or opportunities for speaking or writing, teaching. Because saying no means I get to keep living with my spouse, which I like very, very much. And I had many years when I was teaching full-time on a faculty when I did not get to stay with him. We were separated by 750 miles, and the commute was long and difficult. And so at this stage in our lives, we just really want to be together. And so when opportunities have come that have meant I could have rejoined my old faculty, or I could have been I just had an offer just this spring to take a full-time position at a very prestigious institution, and I turned it down because other things are more important to me. And so for me, in this stage of my life, it's been learning how to be willing to put boundaries around what's really important and making choices that make that possible.
Yeah.
In other times of my life, I've made other choices, partly because I was in a different season and certain opportunities came up that I felt were really the right thing for the two of us to do together and in separate places. As for students, I guess I could recommend make choices about what's really important to you. I think that's good general advice to try to get as much clarity as possible about what really matters for the core of your being. What really allows us to be most fully who God has called us to be, and whatever those boundaries are, whatever those opportunities are, I would really encourage folks to pay attention to that and set things up as much as possible in a way that allows us to thrive.
I always remember hearing from the past someone say, when it comes to big decisions or big opportunities, make your decision about it before you have to make the decision. So maybe challenge yourself ahead of time to say, if such and such a thing happened to me in the future, what would I do about it according to my own health and my own values and my own priorities with my work, my art? And that way, if all of a sudden one of these things lands in your lap, you've already thought about it.
That strategy has worked for me, for sure.
Yeah.
So I can affirm that. I also had a friend who once said to me that when he gets requests to speak or write, or this is another academic, to do something, he makes himself say in his head, my answer is going to be no, unless there appears some compelling reason for why I should say yes instead. And that was just kind of a little self-trick he used to do that would enable him to really take time to think about whether this was going to be a request that he should say yes to, without doing that automatic, oh yes, I'd really love to. Because, we get invitations to do what we love doing, and our automatic response sometimes is just, well, yeah, of course I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But maybe this particular time, the yeah isn't necessarily the best response.
And what I'm hearing some of you say, and what I think is true for me, is that being selective about your expression of your art can be a healthy thing, and to be deliberate about how you're going to present yourself and get yourself out there. And the thing I've been saying in my own head a lot lately is that if you're, I'm going to talk as a musician. If you're a musician who takes a gig and ends up playing a certain kind of gig, then you are the kind of artist who plays that kind of gig, because you just did. And so I always am asking myself, am I the kind of artist that plays that kind of gig? And if the answer is no, I'm not that kind of artist. Then when I get asked if I want to do that kind of gig, I can immediately say, no, because I'm not that kind. But the minute you play it, and that's the thing about, at least in the music business, but probably in all arts that's kind of semi-public, where you've got a little momentum in the public eye, the minute you do something, you've just done it for the world to see, and now you're the kind of act who plays that kind of gig. And so I would get real comfortable with, if you're going to do it, you got to own it. Like, I play those kind of gigs, because once you do, you do. So I don't know. It's kind of a complicated thing, but we've got some audience questions.
The question that someone in the audience has posed here, I think, has to do with sort of your creative discipline. And the question is, how do you structure your time, your schedules, to enhance your own creativity?
I so need to answer this question. This is actually tailing on to the conversation we just had about, separating work and life, and I don't do that. I am the opposite of these folks, and from the outside, you would say that I'm a workaholic. I work 7 days a week at either teaching or making pots or drawing or making music or directing music or something. I am perpetual motion in terms of that, and I am always working to improve my craft, to know more about my disciplines, to become a better teacher, to become a better musician, to become a better potter, to become a better firer, hopefully to become a better husband and a better father, and all of those things. And I don't separate out, like Tangled Blue is its own entity. I am my arts. They are the rhythm of my life is all about participating in the creative disciplines of being alive. So my time is not structured in a normal way. I will drive from my home to my kiln 3 or 4 different times a day if I need to, in order to have the kiln behave the way I want it to at that moment in the firing when it needs to happen, because that's just the rhythm of being good at my discipline and knowing my craft and practicing it well, and essentially giving all of those things as the best they can be to my God. If He gave me these gifts, I should give it back as well as I can.
It seems like the phrase all-consuming is a really apt descriptor for your work.
Yeah.
Well, it also sounds to me like it's not taxing to you.
Well,
I think it's a life-giving thing instead of like, oh, I'm so stressed and I'm so burned out.
Right. It's both. I mean, it is physically taxing to have the body going all the time, and mentally taxing to continue to work towards improvement. But those taxes are rewarding.
Yeah.
They lead to that personal growth, and they kind of help me feel like this is a wonderful life. I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah. Excellent. Let's hear from some more folks.
I would say I've been sloppy with my discipline, and in a way where, like, I am involved in music every day, but the part that is taxing to me is everything you have to do now in order to be a musician, at least in the world that I'm in rock and roll. It's like social media, you have to like push it, and then there's just like you're performing not only when you're on the stage, but when you see someone at a bar and they want to talk to you, and you can't turn it off. So I think in that way, like, learning that the discipline has to come where I go, I'm almost doing nothing today so that I can just have my guitar.
Yeah.
And I can just, it's like, and that's, again, almost the opposite of, like, American culture. Go, 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 like, be like a doer. Well, sometimes doing looks like not much.
Yeah.
Especially as an artist. And I think that's something I actually need to try harder at, is just, like, I need to make sure when I look at my calendar, it's not, like, completely chock full of things.
Yeah.
So I don't have a discipline, I guess, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, or it's discipline in reverse, or it's discipline by space,
Yes.
by openness instead of by filling.
Yep.
Yeah. Should we take another question?
Sure. One of the questions here asks, regarding high-stakes art, talked about a little bit earlier, what's the value of high-stakes art making?
I think maybe more people are engaged because the level of engagement, like if we're saying like this experience this week of a 5-day experience is a lot longer than, Aimée and I sometimes play at events that are this long, but we don't have the same level of engagement
or responsibility
for
the
ownership of it. And so I would say that the energy that I have coming out of this event, I hope will be contagious and will just continue to be a wave that can ride, for a year, and possibly then that wave connects with the next event, which then that wave gets bigger. It just continues to grow exponentially. So I think that's the benefit of high stakes art, is that a larger people get engaged in a more intense way and possibly a greater numbers kind of way. And that's great. There's something to be said for intimate personal art too.
Sure. And
sometimes one leads to the next. But and I wouldn't want one or the other.
Yeah.
I need them both. But high stakes art is the level of energy that I experienced here this week is something I can't get from personal art.
Yeah. This question makes me think of how in the past it might have been more difficult to raise the stakes on your art, because if you couldn't get any attention or momentum on your own, then you just couldn't. You were just stuck in your bedroom. But nowadays, because of technology, it's way easier to engage a larger community. And I just think about like crowdfunding is one way to raise the stakes on your art. Because if you think, I don't have any money, but let's talk musically. I don't have any money, but I want to make an album. In the old days, you just would never make the record. It would be impossible. But now you can crowdfund it on the internet with Kickstarter, Pledge Music, or whatever. But then all of a sudden, now the stakes are high because you've got people giving you money before there's any product. You're obligated to them to fulfill what you promised them in terms of their support of you. And so the stakes are higher in that, I better deliver. But at the same time, there's this community support, there's momentum, there's increased interest in your work, there's a chance of being viral and infectious in terms of the people that can support you. And I just did a crowdfunding campaign for my most recent album, and it felt high stakes to me. It felt like, wow, this is kind of a big deal. And thankfully it worked. Like I hit my goal and the record was paid for, and I could have never done it without the support of those people. And that was like a high stakes thing, and it paid off. But it was a little stressful and it was demanding.
That high stakes thing provides you the motivation to focus so that you will produce something, and you want to produce it at the highest level of quality.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Motivation and a deadline and a built-in audience. I mean, those things are motivating for sure. Any other thoughts about that question? All right, we'll keep trucking.
Well, we have another question here by one of the folks in the audience, and it has to do with, I think, how meanings or definitions of words have perhaps shifted over our time together. And so the person asks, participating this week with all these creative insights and individuals, has your perspective of the meaning of creativity or the personal identity of artists, have those things shifted at all? And I think I would add to that, have you gotten a new lens on any sort of vocabulary words related to creativity, the artist? I know we're all thinking about hidden, that word hiddenness, maybe in some new ways. Any new insights on these kinds of words and terms that you want to share?
Okay, I know that this was a difficult word for some. The word was contaminated, and I loved that word. The whole discussion around the word contaminated, I think that happened on Tuesday, and that word, I think, is going to come up in my writing now, in the complexity of what that is, because the word has a negative connotation culturally, and has a maybe a subversive, positive connotation in my warped little mind, and so I'm still playing with that word a lot, and so yeah, that word is really that's going to be kicking around inside my skull for a while.
Yeah,
I think that true creativity, not just production, but true creativity involves risk. It involves doing something that you're really uncomfortable with, being contaminated with something, and you don't know where that is necessarily going. You know, there are a lot of production potters out there that have their line of work, and they produce and produce and produce, and people say, oh, they're very creative, but they're not really doing anything new. They're not really exploring with it. They're producing rather than creating in that true sense of creativity. And I think that Jesus challenges us to take risks and to be at risk in our faith. He didn't join our lives to make us comfortable and to make our lives easy. He calls us to go into the world not really knowing absolutely what it's going to be like, and yet to take the risk of doing it anyway, of being there anyway, with our faith in the world. I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's a abstract expressionist painter, Richard Diebenkorn, said, "Every day, start something about whose outcome is unknown."
Yeah, we've used unknown and unknowing, not known a lot, and I'm going to go away with that one as well. And then one of my favorite words happened on the first day when we met Keith, and he was talking about editing. And, you know, I think about editing because Dawn's an editor at a publishing company, which is totally a good definition of the word. But when I saw how Keith edits, I thought that's some serious editing. And I just love that term. And I think I'm going to think of that now in terms of songwriting and music, that, you know, editing can be squishing and crushing. You know, I like that word. Should we ask one more audience question, and then Dawn's going to wrap us up here?
Sure. Well, I guess this is a basic one, but someone in the audience was wondering about the meaning of your band name, Tangled Blue, and I think probably I don't know that you've described that at all this week, and so enlighten us.
Oh, you know what? Let's answer that, and I want to hear the meaning of Holly's band name. You can each go.
So, Tangled Blue. Jill and I had these other bands before we were married. One of them was Cross-Eyed. One of them was Fat and Happy. When we got together, we decided Cross-Eyed, Fat and Happy was not something people wanted to see. So we people were calling us from those other bands, and they asked us to come and play, and we said yes because we decided we wanted to try this together. And so Joel and I were brainstorming on the way up to this event. And we came up with 4 names that we thought would work, and Tangled Blue was one of them. We were playing a word association game, just bouncing words off of each other. And so it was a youth gathering that we went to, and the youth at the youth gathering voted, and they chose Tangled Blue.
Wow.
And so we stuck with it.
It was crowdsourced.
It was crowdsourced. And so Joel and I, after some time living with the name Tangled Blue, we come from a faith tradition that likes to ask, what does this mean? And we look at it as a baptism reference, like it's God's work that claims us through the waters of baptism. So tangled being God's work, water and word tangled together, and blue being water.
Cool. And Holly, do you perform as your name, the person, or just as the band, or a little of both?
Little of both.
Okay.
Yep, just depends.
Are the songs the same?
Mostly. Yep, just one. It's like Zoo Animal is almost always a rock and roll show. And when I play under my own name, it's usually just me, or I've got like I actually played last night with a guy on synth and sampler. Sometimes it's a bass clarinet. It's just something weird, but it's not the 4-piece rock band. So
has the band always been called Zoo Animal?
Yep.
Did you think of that name?
I did, I really like letters just in general. I just in design, and I was going through a phase where I just was really enjoying cursive Z's. Literally, I just really enjoyed them for like a week, and I was like thinking of words that, because I'm also a percussionist, and some words just have like they're just nice to say. And I was driving in my old car, and I looked in the back of my rearview mirror, and I noticed my bobblehead zebra, and I just said zoo animal, and I was like, oh, that's like a nice word. And in the same way as y'all, I kind of came up with a reason for it later, but it just that a lot of times we're not really where we belong, but it starts to look like it, but really you're not free. So that's kind of
that's the zoo part.
Yep. So just beware. Sometimes you think you're where you belong, but you're not. It's just a facade.
Wow.
So.
Awesome. Now, there are people here live in the room who already know some of us and know how to reach us, but there's lots of people listening to this podcast on the internet, either this summer, this week, or 5 years from now, and they might have enjoyed this conversation, and they might want to track us down, find us, check out our work, invite us to come and do a show in their community or speak to our group. So, panelist people, how would you like to be found by our listeners?
The easiest way to find me is zooanimalmusic.com and zooanimalevents@gmail.com.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. All right. How about you guys?
Yeah, so for Tangled Blue, it's just tangledblue.com, and info, I-N-F-O, at tangledblue.com will go to both Aimée and I, or you can send us individual email addresses just with our first name before the @ symbol, tangledblue.com.
All right. Audrey, how about you? Do you like when people reach out to you and talk to you?
I love
that
being
okay?
invited to do events like this. This is such great fun.
Yeah.
The best way to reach me is through one of the seminaries where I'm still associated, A. West, W-E-S-T, at lstc.edu.
All right. Thanks.
And my website is keithjwilliams.net and Williams at csp.edu. I teach at Concordia St. Paul, so csp.edu.
Excellent. So listeners out there on the internet, please track down these artists and view their works online and listen and watch and invite. And I bet they would love to see you in your town someday.
We're going to finish with the question we always finish with on our podcast, which is asking you to imagine going back to your kindergarten self and asking you, what would you tell your kindergarten self?
I would tell myself to remind myself that it was okay to take an extra long time walking home on the snowdrifts and looking at all of those images made in the ice along the road, and that wasn't being a bad boy, that was being an artist.
Yeah.
I think I would tell my kindergarten self, don't worry so much about getting it right.
I would tell my kindergarten self to just be you. And I would tell my kindergarten self to start playing drums sooner.
I think I would tell my kindergarten self to not get so stressed out about the white pantyhose with the red electrical tape as stripes that you're being asked to wear for the musical that you have to be in. I don't remember what the musical was, but you're going to be asked to wear lots of crazy stuff when you go on stage. So just don't worry about it and enjoy the experience.
I think I would tell my kindergarten self not to bother with sports.
Yeah! Let's have a hand for our panel. You guys rule. Thank you so much. Audience, give yourselves a hand. And listeners, thank you for listening, and we will see you later. Goodbye.
Creativity.